ever since Season 3 became the new season of Conquest, a lot of players have been asking me about which commanders should they be using in the early game, and what commanders will be the strongest in the early game that you can carry on to Season of Conquest. So today, I'll be discussing the best early game pairs in the whole of Rise of Kingdoms. I'll discuss which commanders you should use in KVK 1 and 2 depending on which troop type you want and depending on how you want to play the end game. So if you're interested in the best commanders that you can use in the early game for different types of players, you definitely want to check out the rest of the video. Now let's start off by discussing the two routes you could go while you work your way to Season 3, because there are two ways you could go. The first way is only getting epic commanders and just saving literally all of your gold heads. Push as much VIP as you can, pump your gems into it, and then just get epic commanders. Don't use any gold heads at all, like literally none. And then once you hit Season of Conquest, or Season 3, sorry, you double expertise a legendary commander. That is currently what a lot of players have been doing. The other method was just playing through Season 1 and 2 how you normally would and investing in legendary commanders as they come along. So I will give you both options, basically. I'll discuss the free-to-play, like really free-to-play, save all your gold heads method, and also the method of just spending an adequate amount, but also saving enough to still be in a fairly good position. Now, we'll start off with KVK 1. I don't think it's really worth discussing the very early game, because if you're in the very early game, you're probably just going to work your way up towards some of these KVK 1 pairs. So, KVK 1, if you want to run infantry, I think that the best option is either a Richard or a Martel. Martel holds longer value, but Richard would definitely be a more powerful commander in the short term. Plus, if you don't want to stick with infantry for the whole time, Richard at 5-1-1-1 is really good for AoE barb farming, so he can still be used after KVK 1. I personally don't recommend investing in him just for AoE barb farming, so if you want to use him in KVK 1, and then you want to use him after to AoE barb farm as well, then it gets you some value because you got to use him for a KVK, and then you can AoE farm with him. As the secondary to either Richard or Martel, your best bet is probably a Sun Tzu, to be honest. When you look at Sun Tzu's kit, it's like he is the best epic commander by far and away, especially since he's an infantry commander who is semi-glass cannon. Is going to work really well behind either Richard, who's a very tanky infantry commander, or Martel, who is also a very tanky infantry commander. You could also consider, if you're running just double epic combination, a Pericles with a Sun Tzu. This combination actually performs quite well in the field, since Pericles is giving some nice shielding effects. He doesn't really have any damage factor on his own, but his shield does give Sun Tzu a fair amount of tankiness. Plus, he is giving a very nice debuff whenever he is getting hit. So, it is quite nice using Pericles with Sun Tzu, and it's going to give you some tankiness. But once again, it's not going to be anywhere near the level of Richard or Martel, though it will be able to be used for quite a while. The other option you could consider is just getting a Bjorn. This is a classic Sun Tzu with the Bjorn. It is a very glass cannon combo, but it's going to do a decent amount of damage in the very early game, and you will notice a lot of players will be running this. Also, for you people who want to spend a bit more money, Pyrus is a good option, only if you buy him from the daily bundles, because he does have some Season of Conquest value in his museum relic. But other than that, he is not near the most powerful infantry commander, and there are definitely better options to be purchasing from the daily special offer. So most players, if you're going to buy Pyrus, you're definitely going to be more of a whale. Same thing can be said with commanders like Mehmed and also commanders like Julius Caesar. So if you're going to be buying those, you're going to be looking at more of a whaley account, and they're not going to be the main priority for most free-to-play low spenders. The one thing I do want to note though for infantry in KVK 1 is do not get YSG. The only reason I say if you're going to be infantry not to get YSG is because at this point you are overcommitting too many gold heads. Unless you plan to diversify into an archer main after the first KVK, I wouldn't get YSG. I'd just stick with getting either a Martel with a Sun Tzu or a Richard with a Sun Tzu. You don't want to overcommit on that KVK 1 purely because if you do, you'll notice that you're in a bad position for once you do reach Season 3. Now, if you want to be an archer main, I think the simplest answer is if you're going for the legendary commanders, YSG. I think that is a very, very simple answer. YSG with literally any archer commander is going to do well. So YSG with Herman is nice. YSG with Kusunoki is nice. If your Kira is expertise, she works. Emotep can work. I prefer Kusunoki, Herman, or Kira, but if you have Emotep, it can work. If you have Elcid at a high level purely because of gold chests, like just the actual gold chest in the tavern, or maybe you're a whale who purchased him, or you have a Thutmose at a high level because maybe you're a whale who purchased him, then you could consider those two commanders as well. But YSG is easily the better option here. Thing with YSG is compared to Martel and Richard, where you can only max their first skill and get most of their value, YSG is really an expertise or nothing commander. So if you're going to go in for YSG, you have to know you're going to be making this commitment to become an archer main, and he's going to be a very powerful commander still, but you are going to have to pretty much go all in or nothing, or just max his first skill and hope it works out. So if you want the short-term investment, you could just max his first skill, and if you want the longer-term investment, like what I would personally recommend if you're going to be an Archer main, you're going to have to go for his expertise, so you can move on and diversify to some other Season of Conquest commanders, which I'll talk about in a minute, and you'll be able to run YSG effectively in Season 3. So his expertise isn't too bad. Just keep in mind it is maybe going to harm you, especially if you're not buying him in the daily bundle. So I think that being an Archer main currently, if you want to get YSG and use him in KVK 1 and 2, you're going to have to be a little bit more of a whale. You definitely want to try and purchase him in this daily special offer as much as possible to get full effectiveness out of him and make him still a reasonable investment. Otherwise, you're going to be noticing you're low on goldeds, and he's not going to bring as much to the open field as you would want if you only max that first skill. Now, one more thing to note, if you do end up getting an expertise YSG, he is probably the best secondary until you reach Season 3, so any secondaries I mentioned today could literally just straight up be replaced with YSG, and it would work fine. But keep in mind, like I said, if you are going to get one legendary commander in Season 1 and then another one in Season 2, and you're going to have YSG as one of those commanders and another commander together, you are very much over-committing on that early game, and I don't really recommend it, but if you really enjoy the early game, it's a route you could go. So do keep that in mind. You could end up going and just expertising 2 legendaries in the early game, but personally, I think it is better to save slightly towards the end game. So if you want to be an Archer main, though, you're probably going to end up expertising YSG, and then put him with like a Herman or a Kusunoki, and they're going to do pretty damn good, but it is going to be quite an expensive investment. As for the double epics on Archers, I think the simplest answer is just Herman and Kusunoki. If you're going to have a decent pair there, it's going to work quite good. I personally ran that until my YSG was at a decent level, so if you want to run this pair, especially in the earlier stages of the game, and even part of KVK 1, if not into KVK 2, it's going to work, but I don't recommend using it unless you are trying to save those goldeds and then future diversify to be an Archer main while you make Archer equipment, for example, on your Kusunoki. So that's what I'd recommend. Make Archer equipment if you want to be an Archer main. Just slap the best pairs that you can put onto your epic commanders, and you're going to notice it's going to do quite well once you reach Season 3, and you can diversify into some more of the legendary commanders rather than running the epic combos. You can also consider running an Ethelfled within these marches, so you could run Kusunoki or Herman Ethelfled. Could also do that with the infantry. I didn't mention her by accident, but she can be run with the infantry or the archers, and she's going to be a very good literally free commander who's going to perform fairly decently. So Kusunoki with Ethelfled, I ran a little bit. Herman with Ethelfled will work. YSG with Ethelfled, Martel, Richard, all these commanders work with Ethelfled, though sometimes you do just want the double of that troop type to get more of their stats, but she's definitely a good option. Now, as for cavalry in Season 1, it's really difficult for me to recommend something that's free to play because the only good cav commander you can access is Minamoto, and he is literally $300, and you have to buy him in the VIP shop. Now, you don't have to expertise him if you want to be a cav main, you don't want to spend too much money. You could get Minamoto to like 5511, which is like maxing his first 2 skills. I think maybe not his first 2, I think it's like his first and then his 3rd skill. If you leveled those up, you'd be in a good spot. But if you're running Minamoto, you're going to have to spend money. Actually, it is his first 2 skills. So you take him to 5511, and he's going to be in a decent position. Obviously, you're not going to have his really good debuff. You're not going to have his expertise that's going to increase his damage, but he'll work on the open field. And in KVK 1 especially, he's going to be a very decent commander. But keep in mind, it's going to be difficult to run calves in KVK 1. The secondary for Minamoto would definitely have to be buy bars. You could get Cao, but in my opinion, he's literally useless in Season of Conquest, so I'd recommend not getting him, but if you're a whale, you could consider doing Cao with Mina. That is currently, in my opinion, one of the strongest, if not the strongest KVK 1 marchers, but it is a really expensive, very poor investment. Unlike YSG, if you get Cao, he's going to have no use in Season of Conquest. At least YSG, at the worst case, can be used to AoE farm. So what I'd recommend is if you're running calves, you get Minamoto, run him with buy bars. Minamoto, the good thing about him is you don't have to actually use any gold heads on him. He's literally just money only. So you could do that. You could also run him with Ethelfled. Personally, I think buy bars is a bit stronger, but if you want to run him with Ethelfled, it's also a great option. And keep in mind, if you do use calves, it's a great whale option, as in you'll be able to use him KVK 1 and 2, and then also save your gold heads for the future. So calves are really nice for those medium, low spender players who want to actually just buy Mina, then save gold heads and work on different commanders in the future. Keep in mind, you'll need at least VIP 9 to expertise him, and that's also going to take a fair amount of gems away, but personally, my restart account is already at VIP 9, so you could probably expertise a Minamoto quite easily, especially by KVK 1, so if you want to run calves, it's a very, very, very solid option if you want to spend money. Free-to-play low spenders, you're going to be stuck with something like a buy bars and a Pelagius, or a buy bars and an Ethelfled. Not as optimal, but it is doable until you reach Season 2. Now, speaking of Season 2, what I'd recommend for calves is getting Saladin. If you want to run Saladin on the open field, you can get him and pair him with an Ethelfled. Ethelfled is literally free, and if she's expertise, which she should be by this point, you'll be able to run her with Saladin, and that's going to be an extremely powerful March. Saladin already has a slow in his kit. He has extreme March speed reductions as well. He has a healing effect reduction, which is nice on Richard. He's extremely tanky, and if you see his 4th skill or his 3rd skill, he gets a ton of skill damage taken reduction. So if you want to get Saladin, 5-5-1-1 or even a 5-5-5-1 Saladin is going to be extremely good. And once you reach Season 3, you can also use him in a ton of marches. So I don't mind actually getting Saladin if you're a free-to-play low spender. Keep in mind though, he's obviously not the best cav in existence, but he is going to bring you some sort of value in Season 3, and he works extremely well with Ethelfled. So in Season 2, that is going to be a very decent pair. For people with Minamoto, you could literally just stick with your Mina with buy bars, or even your buy bars with Pelagius if you really want to be cav still and you're just making equipment for it, or even buy bars with Ethelfled, like I said. Those marches will still work in Season 2, especially the Mina one. That's going to be quite effective, but they are going to be a little bit more difficult, and you'll notice your trades are a little bit worse. Now, what about when you reach Season 2 for infantry? Well, you get access to Alexander the Great, and the thing about him is you get access to him about halfway through KVK 2, so I'm going to say really don't invest in Alex. You're not going to get much usage from him, especially if you move on to that Season 3 era, where you get access to a bunch more, way more powerful commanders. Alex, you're only going to get for half a KVK, and then he loses so much effectiveness. It's just not worth it. By the time you get to use him properly, you've properly ramped his skill up, you've got him with good commanders, you've figured out how he works on the open field, you've pretty much finished. Your KVK is over. You've probably already won or lost the KVK by the time he even comes to the Wheel of Fortune. If not, you're already at Kingsland. So most players, most free-to-players and low spenders especially, I recommend just ignoring Alex and continuing to run whatever Season 1 pair you were running, unless you were running Pericles. If you're running Pericles, drop him, replace him with Bjorn, and you're probably just going to have to city pop for most of the KVK. If you had someone such as Martel or Richard, put them with Ethelfled or put them with Sun Tzu, and that's going to do extremely good. Thing is though, if you want to get Alex, you can still do it. Just keep in mind, I would not do it at all if you put any gold heads in Richard or Martel, and for most players, I'd highly recommend not doing it, but if you really wanted him, you still could do it, and it is still somewhat reasonable to do. Like I said before though, Wales with Pyrus, it's going to work way better with Richard or Martel. Probably will work quite good with Sun Tzu, and definitely will work well with Alex. So if you have Pyrus, you could still use him on the open field, especially if you purchased him from those daily bundles, and he's going to be quite a powerful commander. All players should skip Constantine literally no matter what. He's an extremely low value commander and does not bring too much power to the open field unless you are going to be a Garrison or a very set in on Sunset Canyon player, but I don't recommend getting him like at all. Then for archers in Season 2, you don't really get access to anyone that I'd say you should get. You get access to Tamiris and you get access to Edward. Like, what are you going to do with those two commanders? Almost nothing unless you're a whale. Tamiris, really good if you're a whale. You can run her in a 6-march murder ball if you plan to do that when you hit Season of Conquest. But Edward is literally useless nowadays. His damage factor is actually outclassed, even though he used to have the most damage factor in the game. His stats are still decent, but because of his whole rage issue, he's just an absolutely useless commander past Season 2, and he comes literally at like the end of the KVK. So please skip Edward, don't get him at all, and just continue running whatever Season 1 Archer March you're running. Whether that be a YSG with like a Sun Tzu, or a YSG with a Herman, or a Kusunoki, even a Kira. Anything else is going to be better than an Edward of Woodstock in the long run. He might do really good KVK 2, KVK 3, and Season of Conquest. He's absolutely garbage, and do not touch him. Just don't even like think about investing in him. He is a horrible option. Tamiris is only good for Wales. You can run YSG Tamiris at this point. It's going to work. It's not going to be OP, but it will work. And like I said before, YSG is the best secondary to any of the combinations I mentioned. Maybe besides Saladin Ethelfled, it could technically be better in some situations, but really then Saladin YSG is still better. So keep in mind, if you have YSG and you just want to put him with like a 5 one-on-one Richard, it is still an option, but I'd recommend not doing it purely because it is an expensive investment since you want to try expertise at YSG. And like I said before, you still probably want to be a medium spender, even in KVK2, to try and get his expertise for the least amount of generic gold heads as possible, and the most amount of just YSG sculptures. Now, what about when you hit Season 3? And this is pretty much where you get to decide on which commanders you invest in. And hopefully at this point, you've been putting a lot of gems into VIP. You're at least VIP 12, maybe VIP 10 at the minimum, and you've saved up a fair amount of gold heads. And here's what I'd recommend when you hit Season 3. If you're a cav main who invested in Saladin, your Saladin is going to be best with Hauche Bing. That's what I've noticed. Yes, Nevsky is overall in some situations better, some people would argue, but Nevsky with Saladin is nowhere near as effective as Nevsky with Hauche Bing, purely because Hauche Bing has a thing that he needs to be with a tanky commander, and the best tanky commander you get access to in the early game is easily Saladin. So if you have access to a Saladin and you invested in him, I wouldn't recommend getting him if you hit Season of Conquest. You would just run a Saladin with a Hauche Bing. Hauche Bing has to be the primary, and you're going to be in a really good position. Saladin's tanky, he's got decent march speed, he's got a nice march speed reduction, even though it might stack a little bit with Hauche Bing's. what's going to happen is that march reduction will allow you to pretty much keep the opponent slowed for around 5 seconds instead of the possible 6 you could get if they were split apart. But it doesn't matter. They're going to be a very solid march, and they're going to perform quite well until either you get a better secondary to hatching, for example, you get a Nevsky or you get a Joan, or you could literally just stick with it for quite a while until new calves come out, until you diversify to other marches. For people with Minamoto, Nevsky is the best option. You can just go grab the Nevsky, put them together. Minamoto is bringing the damage that Nevsky needs, plus you can double relic that Minamoto to bring even more stats to Nevsky. And then Nevsky is already an extremely high damage, extremely high stat cav commander who we all know is very good, and they're going to be extremely well together. I still though think that Saladin works a lot better with Hao Bing than he does with Nevsky. As for people who are just pure epic cav players, there are 2 ways you could go from here. You can either get the Nevsky and just put him with Joan, or get Hao Bing and just put him with Joan, or you could actually get both of the commanders. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but the reason I say this is because if you want to diversify into 2 marches, you could get both the cav commanders, and then you can get a Nevsky with a Joan at some point and a Hao Bing with a William, or the other way around, and you'll be able to split them off and make 2 cav marches very effectively, and Hao Bing with Nevsky already works extremely well. So you'll notice that if you do get those 2 commanders and put them together, you have a great temporary march, which you can then split off to make 2 very strong cav marches. As for infantry players in Season 2, you're probably going to have an Alex or a Martel who you're going to be able to use. If you didn't get Alex, don't worry. If you didn't get Martel, don't worry. That means you've saved more gold, that you can make a better plan. But currently, the best way for infantry to move is to get a Scipio Africanus and just put him with a Martel. If Martel is at least 5-1-1-1, so just his active skill max, for now as a temporary march, it's going to be fine because we know new infantry are around the corner, and I don't want to recommend investing in Guan. I don't want to recommend investing in Sargon, who are already good commanders, but we know there are new ones coming soon. So if you're about to enter Season 3 and you've got infantry, I'd recommend just get the CPO. I think CPO is going to hold a lot more value even once the new commanders release, and then put him with like Martel or Alex or even YSG or even Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu could even work. So if you're desperate to be an infantry player and you just want to wait for those new commanders, which I highly recommend doing, get CPO, put him with any infantry commander. It's going to be a decent pair for now. He can kind of buff that commander up to a good standard, and then you wait for the new commanders to release. If you don't want to do that, you can buy Guan and the daily special offer. You could just straight up invest in Guan. But like I said before, there are new commanders around the corner for infantry. We don't know exactly what they're going to do yet. So I don't want to say go invest in Guan, go invest in Sargon, go invest in Tarek. I'd say just get the CPO and then wait for these new commanders to come out, see what they're like, and then decide if you want to go and get Guan, Sargon, or Tarek. You want to see what these new commanders could do before you might miss out on them and invest in commanders, which are not going to be nearly as strong once these new ones release. Especially if you've done the double epic combo, you can definitely save gold heads to even expertise the new commander on day of release if they are extremely good, and that's going to set you up in an extremely powerful position above a lot of players, especially if these commanders are meta breaking, which is what I think infantry are due for, a meta breaking commander, and I wouldn't be surprised if they get one. So if there is a meta breaking infantry commander and you did double epics and you have enough gold heads to expertise 2 commanders, you are in a really good position for once they release. Now, as for Archer mains, the best thing for you to do is get your YSG, who you probably already have, and put him with Boudica Prime. I say Boudica Prime because YSG with ZHUGE, yes, it's powerful, but it is not that powerful. And I say that because YSG gets really boosted by being with Boudica. Boudica brings the active skill damage taken increase the opponent gets, which is very powerful. She brings a march speed reduction so YSG can stick to the target and drop more AoEs into people around him and that target. She brings a ton of stats which he needs, including march speed. Even though it's a little bit, it is better than the nothing ZHUGE brings. And also Boudica has a lot of normal attack damage bonus and skill damage taken reductions. Boudica is the tanky commander, which YSG needs, and then ZHUGE is the DPS commander. And I don't think ZHUGE is the best first investment for archers. I've stated it before, he is still good in 1v1 situations, and if you can micromanage him a lot, but if he gets caught out in the field, he gets caught out in the field. There is no getting away. With Boudica, you can at least take a hit, you have a chance of getting away, and then you can even get ZHUGE after you get Boudica. It's not like you're set in stone with that Boudica YSG. You can eventually diversify to like a Henry with a ZHUGE, Boudica with a YSG, or a Henry with a YSG, Boudica with a ZHUGE. There's lots of ways you could end up going with these commanders. There is no just like, if you get YSG, you're stuck with YSG. You can eventually swap him in for ZHUGE, but for now, you definitely want to get the Boudica first, and you'll notice that she's going to do a lot better than the ZHUGE, especially if you're able to get her first 3 skills maxed, as that's where she gets 99% of her value. I don't recommend going past that. So if you get Boudica 5551 with a YSG, it's going to be extremely strong. ZHUGE is going to work as well. You max his first 3 skills as well, and then eventually work towards his expertise. And then you would have to work towards Boudica, because ZHUGE with YSG, as you want to get more and more marches, is much harder to use since you won't be able to micromanage it. And I don't like how it performs when you are not giving it your full attention. Now, if you're running the double epics, you're in a really, really good position for archers because you can go and get Boudica with ZHUGE, and you're going to have two really strong commanders that work well together. So if you want to get those two commanders, if you double expertise these epics, and then you have the gold heads, they're going to be extremely powerful. Now, hopefully this video brought you some value, teaching you which commanders you should invest in for the early game, and how to make those into a powerful Season of Conquest march, depending on which troop type you want to focus. So if you found my content interesting or you want to see more of my content, even just talk to me, consider joining the Archer Syndicate Discord. It's a great way to get in contact with me and fellow people who are watching this channel and subscribe to the channel. So if you want to join the Archer Syndicate Discord, the link will be in the pinned comment and also in the description. So consider coming by. It is a very great place. Now I just want to say thank you very much and see you in the next one.